Setting up an action plan is one of the most important first steps in using Next efficiently. We have a lot of preloaded plans in here that you can work from. Simply come in here and make a copy. I'll show you how we can just start making a plan from scratch. So by clicking on this Create New Plan button, we will call it Team Buyer Closing Plan. So you can see we're dealing with really just a blank canvas. Using this add task button, you can see we can pick from a standard task, an email task, or an SMS task. We're just going to go ahead and get the ball rolling with a standard task. So we'll call it test task 1. Within here, if we want to mark this as a key date, we can do so. That represents a contingency or a very important deadline with the contract. All tasks are important, but some are more important than others. So your inspection contingencies, the closing date, anything that you would be in some big trouble if you missed, I recommend you mark as a key date. You can also mark a task private. When a task is private, only those parties who are assigned the task can see it. Also, we have an only during business week option. And what this does is that if this task were to fall on a Saturday or a Sunday, it will automatically shift it up to the Friday before. So a lot of administrators and transaction coordinators who work Monday through Friday use this tool. So we want to make sure that we don't come in on a Monday and find that we have missed a task that was due over the weekend. Down here is where we would pick how many days before or after the start and the end date. So our start date is essentially the start of a purchase contract. It could be the day that we go pending or the day that the contingencies are based upon. And the end date for a closing action plan is typically the day of closing. If you're doing a listing, you could use these as the list start date and the list expiration date. If you're managing any other kind of process that has a start date but no end date, you never have to use the end date. You can build all tasks around the start date. So we'll just go ahead and say within 1 day after our start date, or in other words, our pending date, we want this task to occur. We can put a description. This is great so that if you are using or training new people within your team, or if you have anyone using this tool that just might need some reminders on how to complete a task, that can all be added here. And then down below, we would assign it to the different roles on our team. Now, it is important prior to coming in and creating your action plans that you think about how you want to organize your team. So you do have the ability in the settings page to create custom roles. And once you create those roles, they will be listed here. So for example, if I want this task to be assigned to the role of transaction coordinator, I could do that. Once a person is assigned a task, they also have the option to get a reminder. So if you wanted to give your real estate agent a reminder of this task up to 3 days before, you can select that here and they'll get an individual email reminding them to complete this task. All right, we'll go ahead and assign it to both of these parties, the agent and the transaction coordinator, and we will click Save. So pretty easily, we can start building out our tasks one by one. Now, once we have an assigned task, so the manager and the coordinator and the real estate agent, they will all show up here under this filter under assignee. Let's go ahead and add another task. We'll add another standard task, call this task 2. We will make this due the same date as the other one, but in this case, we're only going to assign this to the role of our other assistant. Okay, so that's the only person. I'll undo it from the manager. So go ahead and click on Save Task. Now you can see we have a other assistant task here. We have this task up above, and other assistant has been added to our filter list. As I move between the filter, I can start displaying which tasks are assigned to which parties. The other thing that you'll note is that for any task that has the exact same due date, so in this case, this is 1 day before start date. The one down here is 1 day after the start date. So if our actual start date was on, say, June 1st, this task would come due on May 31st, and this task would come due on June 2nd. I cannot actually rearrange these tasks. They will not let me move. If I were to change this task to 1 day after the start date to match our other one, now all of a sudden I can move these tasks around. There's a lot of scenarios where people want to rearrange their tasks, but first we follow these rules here for when things are going to be occurring. And then anything that has a matching task, you can rearrange. So if you have a problem with a task occurring later on, you may just have to go in and change the actual number of days before or after the start date. Once we've created a task, we can also add dependent tasks. So down here, I can pick from a dependent standard task, email task, or an SMS task. And what this does is it allows us to set a due date not based on the start and the end date, but actually do a number of days after the parent task or the original task that we created this dependent task from is completed. So let's say I want to send out a congratulations text message. So this is set to occur, we'll say 1 day after this task is marked complete, and the message will say, congrats on getting through inspections. Down here, we decide who are we going to be sending this to? Well, the buyer is going to be the recipient, and the person assigned to the task is going to, in this case, be the, let's see, we'll put it on the role of assistant down here. Okay, so once you check another box down here, you can come in and unassign it here. So go ahead and click on save, and now you'll see that we have underneath this task, we have this one due 1 day after task 2 is marked complete. You'll also note that we have a filter that can display once we select our certain tasks, we want to see, okay, which ones are going to the buyer, which ones are going to the lender, which ones might be going to the real estate agent. So we'll create another filter down here that we can turn on and turn off filters as we get a better overall view of what our action plan is going to look like. So we'll check all these again. So we've talked through creating tasks, creating due dates, assigning to multiple parties, creating SMS tasks. I'll show one more important piece, and that's an email task. So if we were to create an email task from scratch and name this task time to submit your earnest money. Now, what you'll know is that the task name also is going to become the subject line for the email. Okay, and at the end of it, we will tag the actual property name. So what we want to do is not only give this a name that we recognize on our to-do list, but also something that will look good when an email is sent. Okay. Down in here, we can also go ahead and then type out our email however we want it to look. We can copy and paste into here as well. So to turn this in, blah, whoops, blah, blah, blah. We can put in some bullet points. We can do some other formatting, and we're going to continue to increase this editor. As you type through, you will see that this will get larger and larger. So this is meant to be a pretty generic message that you can go in and tweak and edit before it gets sent out, but it just is kind of the canned response you send to all parties involved. Again, we will determine who's going to be assigned this task. So we'll go ahead and say that we'll give this to the role of assistant as well. And then we can also control who is receiving the email and who is being copied on the email. So we want the buyer to receive this. We want the manager to be copied. And then we'll also go ahead and send the copy to the assistant. One thing to note with this email task is that you can be a recipient without actually being assigned the task. Okay, so you can go ahead and send this to any parties that you want copied on the actual email. If we do not put an actual due date in here, which is a possibility, it's going to show up at the very end of the list with a no due date label tied to it. So if you want to change that, if you find that your tasks keep dropping to the bottom, chances are you forgot to put the due date in. We have this option where you can control who is the sender of the email. So in all our emails, we automatically populate the signature down on the bottom. It can be the manager on the account, it can be the real estate agent, or you can just leave it with whoever clicks send. So whoever's the one sending it out, it'll have their email signature set up with it. And then as for the greeting, when you're setting up this email, don't worry about adding a greeting. That will get automatically added in at the time that the email is created. So if this is meant to be sent to the buyer, it'll automatically pull the buyer's first name. and this email will say, "Hi, Jim," at the very start of it. So really, we're just putting in the body of the message. And of course, we can go in and tweak this and preview it before it actually gets sent out. So overall, that is how we build our action plans. Again, you can work with the ones we already have, or you can just start creating from scratch. This is a great way to really drill deep into what your team is doing to provide amazing service for your clients throughout every process of the real estate purchase and sale. Thanks so much.